Very much for joining me today. Peter, you've got a new book out, Manhunt. Can you tell me a little bit about what started you down the path of trying to find Kevin?
Yes, well, in February of last year, 2019, I left the Channel 4 show called Hunted. I'd kind of run my course on that show. In the last series, when I was the chief, we caught every fugitive, which was the ultimate aim for us hunters. We were party poopers in a huge way, and we all loved it. There was quite a bit of public reaction because supporters of the show, some of them were really miffed that we'd caught them all. Anyway, we celebrated long into the night. It was great. I'd done 4 series of the main show, 2 of the celeb versions. I felt I'd kind of taken it about as far as I could. You couldn't top that. It was a good time to bow out. And at that point, I was thinking, well, what's my next major project going to be? My publisher agreed that I could do another book as long as we got the right sort of subject material. And I had to face the harsh reality, and that is, whilst I've written plays for Radio 4, books, been a veteran of numerous documentaries and thousands of broadcasts about crime and policing, the harsh reality is I was best known for catching pretend fugitives on a bloody entertainment show. Anyway, I'm not complaining. You know, it helped with my profile. It was fine. Yeah, it paid some bills. So that was fine. And it therefore made sense that instead of doing another book on unsolved murders, like I had done with the previous 2, why don't I combine my skill set, my experience, my network of contacts, and what I'm best known for? So instead of hunting a pretend fugitive, go after a real one. And when it comes to fugitives, there is no one more wanted in the UK than Kevin Thomas Parle.
The book goes through from when he murdered 2 people in Liverpool, and obviously to today. Why has he been let go? I mean, he killed that woman. He was in custody, and then he was allowed to go roam on the streets. How did that even happen?
Okay, first and foremost, I must make this clear. Kevin Parle has not been convicted of either murder. He is wanted for both of them, however. So much so that he's on the National Crime Agency's most wanted list. They very much want to speak to him, Merseyside police do, about these 2 murders. The first one, which was the murder of Liam Kelly, a 16-year-old boy, a child, gunned down in an area of Liverpool called the Dingle, in June of 2004. Now, Kevin Parle was arrested during the early stages of that inquiry, and 3 people have been convicted of crimes attached to Liam's murder. One man called Anthony Campbell pleaded guilty to murder. Another man called Peter Sinclair was convicted of destroying evidence on behalf of Kevin Parle, being involved in a getaway car, destroying phones and clothing and all of that. Peter Sinclair got 8 years. And a young, naive woman who thought she was Kevin Parle's only girlfriend at the time gave a false alibi statement for Parle, and she was later convicted of attempting to pervert the course of justice. Now, that unfortunately led to the police granting Parle bail, astonishingly, because, of course, they were up against a ticking clock. When somebody's taken into custody, the police, generally speaking, have 24 hours to deal with them. They might have 36 hours if there's an extension granted, or possibly in terrorism cases, you can detain people for longer. But there they were. They've got Kevin Parle in custody. They're up against a ticking clock. They needed to check out the alibi. They granted him bail. And he's never been in a cell since, tragically. So that was kind of the position with regards to Liam's murder. What I will say is, when Campbell, Sinclair and the young woman went to court, the court was clearly told that Kevin Parle pulled the trigger. So he is very much wanted for Liam's murder. Unconvicted, yes. Wanted, you better believe it. If we then fast forward to August of 2005, yet another ghastly crime. This was the murder of a 22-year-old young woman mother of 3 young children, called Lucy Hargreaves, who was blasted to death as she lay on her sofa in her home with a shotgun. Her house was then set on fire. It became an absolute inferno, destroying virtually all, in fact, all forensic evidence. And Kevin Parle remains very much wanted for that crime. There's plenty of background and more about the stories and various outcomes, of course, in the book, which I unashamedly plug. But the reason is, you know, life hunting Kevin Parle, who the police haven't found in 16 years. So please cut me a little bit of slack in terms of time, because I will find him, and he must be put in front of a court. He must answer the allegations against him, and then perhaps justice will be served.
I mean, from all reading about Kevin, he is 6'6" and ginger. Where on earth can someone that stands out so much be hiding?
Yeah, shaven headed with ginger hair colouring, so there may be a hint of ginger there. 6'6", broadly built, and in athletic shape, shall we say? And yeah, now he's had some close shaves. I mean, he's lived the life of Riley, and I want to change all that. I want him to become the most well-known fugitive on the planet, so that we shrink the world, so that we squeeze the globe so tightly that his 6'6" ginger nut pops up somewhere and law enforcement can slip the handcuffs on. I'm making great progress. A huge number of very courageous people have come forward and told me what they know, which is wonderful. And I urge and encourage people to keep doing that. They can also talk to Crime Stoppers or Merseyside Police if they want. But as people will read and get to know about me, I never declare my sources. And so whatever you tell me, and your identity remains utterly safe with me. I did that kind of stuff in the cops, and I've not abandoned those principles in any way, shape or form.
So how come you're writing the book now then, and not a little bit further down the line when you've potentially got him? Do you think that this is going to try and get him out of the woodwork a bit more?
Yeah, I've been very fortunate. The BBC commissioned a podcast, a 12-part podcast series called Manhunt, Finding Kevin Parle. And that was released earlier on this year. It's still out there on BBC Sounds. And it was downloaded over 2.2 million times and counting. It was successful. It won an award. People liked it a lot. And actually, it's all part of my overall strategy, which I've had right from the outset of hunting Kevin Parle. And that is to raise his profile, to make life unbearably uncomfortable for him. It's all part of my plan. And so, of course, the book, Q waving the book in front of the viewers, the book, I hope, is just going to be yet another useful tool as I try to find him, because I don't have the resources of the police. It's me, my pen, my notebook and my mobile phone against those who are harbouring him and funding him, you know, serious and organised crime, who will undoubtedly have resources that completely swamp me. So I have to, because I've got a bit of a Z-list public profile, I could, you know, I got the podcast commissioned with great help from a friend of mine. I've written the book. These are tools which the police wouldn't have in their hunt for a fugitive. I can use these. It's all about out of the box thinking, but I don't have a monopoly on good ideas. And even though the book has only been out a few days, people have already been in touch with me suggesting things that I could do, which I think are really, some are fantastic. May I give you an example?
Go for it.
Okay. There's a £20,000 reward on offer for Kevin Parle's capture and conviction. That reward is offered by Merseyside Police. Now, I've had a bit of an issue with the police about it being dependent upon Parle's conviction, because a well-intentioned member of the public that picks up the phone and says to me, he is now living at this location, he is there, get the cops through the door, has no control whatsoever over whether he's charged or not, the actions of the CPS, the vagaries of the court system, juries, judges, and all of that. So I think it is manifestly unfair that that reward should be dependent upon conviction as well. So somebody said to me, well, why don't you start like a GoFundMe account and ask listeners to the podcast, readers of the book, viewers of Bedroom Forensics to contribute £1 each, for example, and make that pot only dependent upon information that leads to his arrest. So don't attach any of those conviction kind of T's and C's to it. And I think that's a brilliant idea. In fact, the person who suggested that offered £1,000 to get the ball rolling, which is quite remarkable.
Would you have every single person that gave you good information that led somewhere some money, or would you just have one pot at the end?
No, it would have to be for the golden nugget of information that led directly to his capture. But of course, you raised a great point, which is why I need to give this some considerable thought, because there's going to be legal questions raised by me offering something like that. And what I don't want to do is get all this goodwill, which fortunately is coming my way at the moment, and the encouragement and the support and people doing what I want them to do with the book, which is buy it and then leave it on a bus. We used to be, but lend it to a relative, give it to a friend. I hope my publisher isn't watching this, right? Because I really want the word being spread. This is about Parle, not profit. For me, it's all about Parle. My publisher will want to make a profit, clearly, but I want the word to be spread about Kevin Parle, so that, as I say, his profile is raised enormously. We shrink the world, and life is just too uncomfortable for him.
I mean, this has got to be a kind of a good time, doesn't it? With the quarantine lockdown, giving people more of a address. Maybe we know a little bit about where his determined actions are, because I know there was rumours, wasn't there, that he was in Dubai or Thailand, but now that it's come to lockdown, have you felt that it's actually helped progress finding him further?
Well, it depends. It kind of depends exactly what country he is in and what the lockdown process is there. Now, my great friend and podcast editor, Mark Sandell, and I went to Spain earlier on in the year because so much information led us there. It was just irresistible. We had to go there, and we had quite an amazing time out there. And I think, unshakably, we proved that Kevin Parle is very much alive. Now, when lockdown was imposed in Spain, around about sort of the time ours was, apparently sources out there were telling me that the police were literally stationed at the entry and exit points of every village, town and city. It was really almost enforced to the point of being at the end of a barrel of a gun, very, very strictly enforced and adhered to. Likewise, Dubai became like a ghost town, like so many other places around the world did. And Dubai, of course, being a very autocratic regime out there. Thailand, I was talking to sources out there during lockdown, and they also had an alcohol ban during lockdown. Thank goodness we didn't have that over here, because I would never have got through it. Soft drinks are available as well, ladies and gentlemen. So yeah, it was all kind of, it would have depended on where he was, and maybe travel had become difficult for him. Maybe he was holed up in one particular location. Maybe he had people involved in criminality with access to trains, planes, automobiles, and who knows what, and were able to smuggle him around. But all those answers, I hope, all those questions will be answered, I hope, when he is captured and he grants me an interview.
Do you think that, is he such a kingpin? I mean, he killed 2 people and then he's been on the run for 16 years, as you've said. But I mean, the way you talk about him and him being other countries, he sounds something a bit bigger than just some guy that was in Liverpool and running the streets. Is he What kind of person do you think he is?
Forgive me, Alex, I've got to correct you once again. He allegedly killed 2 people.
My
Okay,
mistake.
he's unconvicted. I don't want him getting captured. Okay, and then going to court, for example, if he's charged and goes to court, and his defence team argue that he could never get a fair trial because he'd been convicted on Alex's bedroom forensics podcast, for example. Okay, so forgive me for just reinforcing that. I have to do that. Okay, in my police career, I spent over a decade working undercover. So I pretended to be a gangster, a crook, a villain, and I bought millions upon millions of pounds worth of drugs, and I bought guns, counterfeit currency, high value stolen goods, and from time to time, I pretended to be a contract killer, a gun for hire, an assassin. Did that for a decade or more, and on some occasions, I would want a driver stroke minder with me, okay? Because sometimes I was ferrying around hundreds of thousands of pounds of the Metropolitan Police Commissioner's money. In other words, the taxpayers' money. So I had to be cautious not to put myself in a position where people could rob me for that money, for example. And invariably, when I took a minder stroke driver with me, I wanted them to be a bit of a lump. I didn't want them to be 5'8", extremely well turned out and stunningly handsome, because that probably wouldn't have intimidated some of the very serious crooks that I was operating against. So I would want a lump with me. Hello, gentlemen, meet my ugly mate. Now, you wouldn't want to upset him, would you? So don't upset me. Those kind of conversations I had time and time again. So now if we look at Kevin Parle, as we've said, 6'6", broadly built, athletic, wanted in connection with 2 murders. Imagine if somebody is standing on a quayside somewhere, negotiating an enormous drug deal, perhaps with South Americans, for example. Kevin Parle would be a very useful asset, because you could say to the people from Bolivia, Peru, Colombia, of course, or anywhere else that were perhaps supplying, millions of pounds worth of cocaine, you could say to them, now, you're not going to rip me off for my money, are you? Standard gear to me, because if you do, you see my 6'6" mate here, he'd get rather cross. And his reputation. What he is, brackets allegedly, capable of. So let's all be professional. Let's all be businesslike. Let's get this deal done and make ourselves millions of pounds. That is the kind of situation whereby I think Kevin Parle could be an asset. So what I'm trying to do now, by making him the most well-known fugitive on the planet, hopefully, is turn him from an asset to a liability. When the heat gets cranked up so much, and there is so many eyes and ears out there knowing about Kevin Parle, looking for Kevin Parle, that they actually say, do you know what, pal? Your time's come. We can't have you working for us anymore. You'll either have to go and hand yourself in, or we've got to cut you loose.
So do you think that he's been playing on his notoriety then for the last 16 years to get into these places around the world?
No, he's lived a life of Riley. And when I first went to Liverpool on the 29th of April, 2019, the day I launched my hunt for him, I had a press conference in London, jumped on a train after that and went to Liverpool with my great friend and podcast editor. We went into a pub late at night. We were exhausted. We wanted a nightcap. I asked the governor of the pub if I could hand out my flyers, because nobody escapes a flyer. I'm always handing them out wherever I go. And I said to the governor, can we hand them out? Mark and I did a pincer movement. He started at one end of the bar and I started at the other. And people literally in Liverpool were going, Kevin who? Never heard of him. Now that's all changed in the last 18 months, courtesy of the podcast and my book. Did I mention my book, Manhunt? Oh, by the way, as a shameless plug, I have been really flattered and knocked sideways by this. People have been saying wonderful things about it, you know, in terms of what a good read it is. So,
have you got any?
anyway.
You're going to give me some quotes. Who's been saying it? What kind of great things have they said?
Yeah, if you allow me to just delve in here and dig out some reviews. Pardon the language, but somebody said it was bloody brilliant. A young lady said she loved every page, which I thought was a delightful thing to say. And I'll dig up some other quotes as we speak, if I may. So, yeah, no, I don't think in terms of public persona and public notoriety that he had that. But in the book, I declare unashamedly the emotional journey that I've been on. And I really have been on a journey. I've been put through the ringer, to be perfectly frank, on a number of occasions. And you hit on a really great point, which I've anguished over long and hard, because I started having people telling me that they couldn't speak about him anymore because they'd been warned off. And this is during my hunt. So I was concerned that perhaps by raising his profile, I'd done what you've spoken about and kind of raised his value to criminality, as opposed to turning him into an asset. I'd made him more notorious, which was of value potentially to the criminal underworld. And I'm still not sure if that's something that I've done. So yes, I have anguished over that. But I have to park those concerns and those fears and just plough on, because this is my life's work. As long as I can as long as I'm drawing breath, can put one foot in front of the other and can bash a keyboard, I'm hunting Kevin Parle.
I mean, obviously, like this isn't going to end until he's found and he's put forward for the alleged crimes that he's committed. But on your on your journey through Spain and through all of your connections, have you come across? Do you know anything else that he's been up to? Have you got a bit of an idea about his you said, living a life of Riley, but what has his life been like?
Well, in the early days when he was on the run, he lived on a holiday camp in Torrevieja down in Spain. Girlfriend on his arm, pint of lager in his hand, Liverpool mates surrounded him, in and out the swimming pool, in and out the bar and the restaurant. I mean, truly galling. Imagine hearing that if you're Liam and Lucy's family and friends. And some people are appalled by that. I've also had testimony from 2 former girlfriends who speak about him in very unflattering terms, about his controlling nature. You know, he was charm on one hand. His ability to charm young women is absolutely legendary in some circles. But after the charm came the control, that coercive, corrosive, horrible behaviour. And I cannot applaud the 2 young women enough who came forward and gave me their testimonies. Very, very courageous people. And of course, I put that evidence that we gathered about him to a great friend of mine, who's Professor David Wilson, Professor of Criminology. And he gave us his, based on witness testimonies and all of that. And of course, David is a far more learned man than me and gives a really good insight into the mindset of Kevin Parle. Okay, I've pulled up.
Reference.
Sorry, I've pulled up some of these reviews now.
Yep, go for it.
If I can just unashamedly, and I'll just take a line or two from some of them. People have posted 3 reviews on Amazon. They're all 5-star. Here we go. Really well written, insightful, open and honest. Peter is clearly a man of principle and determination, and I felt quite humbled by the drive and energy he has. That energy will help bring justice. Really interesting, well written and honest. I loved reading it and couldn't put it down. I hope the hunt is successful and Parle is found soon. Peter Bleksley is a man possessed and obsessed. The object of that obsession is Liverpudlian criminal Kevin Parle, etc., etc. I'll go on to his last slide to see what that is. Oh yeah, also interesting is Bleksley's observation that various police departments don't seem overly interested in catching Parle, which raises questions. And they are questions that I discuss in the book, of course.
I mean, obviously you've had a long history of working with Scotland Yard and the police. So, I mean, working with the CPS is the worst thing that I've ever experienced. And obviously dealing with that across the country, trying to get someone, and then they forget about it, don't they, after 16 years? You know, it's a cold case. It's not really on anybody's desk. So you're highlighting something that, you know, unfortunately has taken this long, really.
I've never met a senior detective that relishes in a case that is old and cold. Generally speaking, they don't like it. Where's the fame and the glory, you know? And what they want is, you know, that murder that happened last night, last week, last month. There's got a lot of current media attention to it, where there's public pressure, public concerns, and all of that. And I get that, and that's only right, of course. That is only right that they put everything they possibly can into solving those ghastly crimes. Yeah, old and cold. I don't find an awful lot of enthusiasm for those kind of cases.
No, but surprisingly, you know, there are actually, but there's interest for them, isn't there? Because there's, you talk about the podcast that you did, but there's a whole bunch of them out there that looked into, you know, you did a whole bunch of stuff on unsolved murders. This, again, allegedly, this case going forward. So I think it's a great time, isn't it, to get people interested and fighting for something.
Yeah, and I'm very fortunate in that I can do what the police manifestly can't or won't do. Another example, more than one person has told me they are utterly convinced that whilst he's been on the run, Kevin Parle will have used sex workers. So I've reached out, and he goes, but that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? You know, what is a sex worker relationship like? I'm obviously dealing with the testimonies of others here, right? But it's a short-term thing. You know, money is paid, end of story. You know, a relationship of convenience, shall we say. And so that might actually work very well for Kevin Parle. You know, he clearly had a voracious sexual appetite in his younger days when he was a legendary chat-up merchant. And I'm sure that's not disappeared. He's only 40 now. He celebrated his 40th birthday in May of this year. And I've got to tell you, that day was particularly miserable for me, because the thought of him raising a glass and being toasted and having a good time really stuck in the back of my throat. So yeah, sex workers, has he used them? Quite possible, quite possible. Now, I've reached out to some sex worker organisations, and they haven't exactly been swift in getting back to me. Now, I understand that, because a quick, you know, Google search, other search engines are available. Sorry, it's not the BBC, is it? I forgot. Right, now, a quick, you know,
See
a
what
quick
you
search
want.
of me online will obviously reveal that I'm an ex-detective. So I can understand that sex worker organisations might be reluctant to engage with me. That hasn't stopped me. I have engaged with sex workers online. One only just last week has given me other organisations to contact, and I'm reading one of my post-it notes with those organisations on there. I shall do that. But a sex worker reached out to me some months ago. Now, I know we are entering the realms of the utterly unbelievable here, right? But this is a true story. And she said, I was her daddy crush. Right? Now, I mean, okay, there's no catering for bad taste, obviously.
Ah, right? Everyone has a crush.
Yeah. So anyway, I thought, right, you know, it's clearly a joke, you know. So I entered into the spirit of things and communicated with her. What she actually did, it was during lockdown, and she said, you know, oh, can we have a rendezvous? This is on Twitter, right? So it's all very public, right? You know, it's joke, right? Just keep joke at the forefront of your thinking here, right? She said, can we meet in a motorway services, blah, 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 blah. So I'm replying on Twitter, yes, of course, you know, what time, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, a few people didn't, because I lost a few followers.
I'm not surprised. Probably sound like a proper hookup.
Yeah, Yeah. No, but so I responded. So the following day, when this 4 p.m. liaison was going to happen, okay, I put a tweet out every hour, and all I was doing was taking the mickey out of myself, right? That she would respond. And of course, I put the hashtag stay home, save lives at the bottom of every tweet. And I also put, none of this is true. I couldn't make it any clearer. Some people still took offense, but anyway. So all these jokes that I made, sorry, I call them jokes. It was my rather mediocre attempts at humor. But these jokes that I made were all at my expense. And it was on the journey, and I'd make jokes about cucumber and tiny chipolatas and all sorts of stuff, just completely taking the mickey out of me. But that sex worker's account resolved to Manchester. Now, there's a man who is still of interest to me in my inquiry, who comes from Manchester, doesn't live there anymore, notorious criminal. And I've been trying to track him down and get in front of him, and I've reached out to family members and all of that. And so, I can do that kind of thing, because what was to say that young lady might not have known the man involved in crime that I wanted to talk to. It was worth a punt. It entertained quite a few people. It obviously annoyed some who reached for that unfollow button and off they went. But yeah, and I'll do these kind of things. They're unconventional. Law enforcement simply wouldn't do them. But, because at the end of the day, it's not about me, and it's not even about Kevin Parle. It's about Liam and Lucy, and getting this man in front of a court to answer the allegations made against him. And then we will see if justice is served.
So did you go to the car park?
No, it was locked down.
I'm just checking.
It was, what part of stay home, save lives didn't you get? I'm a married man, as you know, with teenage boys living at home.
Did they go to the car park? Well, Twitter is full of some very interesting characters. We're sliding into your DMs, no doubt.
If I'll go anywhere, and I'll meet anyone, and as long as it leads to Kevin Parle being placed in handcuffs, simple as that. And Absolutely. I'll never disclose your identity.
So, just about the book one more time. What can people expect from it in a nutshell? We've also had some great reviews there. We've talked through the book about, what you've gone through in the last year. But if someone was like umming and ahhing, what would you say to get them to buy it?
Okay. If you've listened to our BBC Sounds podcast, Manhunt, Finding Kevin Parle, and there's 12 episodes out there, you might think to yourself, why on earth would I buy Peter Bleksley's book? Because I've heard the 12 episodes of the podcast. Very different vehicles, very different. I would, a rough guess, say that 15% of the content of the book has come from the podcast. The rest is so much more. It's the stuff I couldn't put in the podcast. There are certain things, and the BBC have been quite brilliant, and their lawyers have been very courageous, but there's stuff that couldn't go in the podcast, but has gone in the book, because my publisher's lawyers, I think, may be a bit less risk averse than the BBC's. And that is understandable, because, they're a commercial entity and the BBC is public funded broadcasting. So there is no criticism of anybody here. They've got their jobs to do. There's a lot more about the emotion that I've been through, how criminals have wasted my time, my efforts, my money, all with a view to trying to make me look stupid, and they succeeded. But it has only strengthened my resolve. Yeah, I've been through the ringer a few times, but I'm not complaining. This was all my idea. I've only got myself to blame. I rewind to the press conference on the 29th of April, 2019, held it in London. Danny Shaw, BBC Home Affairs correspondent, this is before the podcast has been commissioned, by the way, is plonked right in the front row, smack bang in front of me. And when I throw it open to any questions, he said, and these were typically brilliant and quite proper BBC questions. The first one was, has anybody ever done this before? In other words, has a member of the public ever gone on the hunt for Britain's most wanted, murder fugitive? And I said, to the best of my knowledge, no. And his next question was, who's paying for this? Brilliant question. Absolutely right. I discuss it all in the book. I kind of gave it some considerable thought as to whether I should declare in the book how much money I've earned during this hunt for Kevin Parle. In other words, through the advance for the book and the podcast. And I put it in there. I've got to be a witness of truth. I have to be absolutely credible and truthful. Otherwise, I'm shortchanging anybody who parts with their hard-earned cash to read the book. And the bottom line is, thus far, I have not put one carrot on my family's dining table out of the money that I've been paid in connection with Parle. It's all gone on planes, trains, automobiles, petrol, hotels. You know, I've been in Liverpool countless times, Manchester, Warrington, Wales, Spain, and other places that I can't quite declare at the moment. And it's all gone. There's not a penny in my pocket that I've made out of. And now, I'm not pleading poverty because I do other stuff. Well, I did prior to COVID, you know, most of that has dried up. But so I'm not saying I'm a poverty case. I was fortunate enough to present a TV series last year, and that was fine. You know, that money contributed to putting food on the table and clothes on our backs. That's all fine. I'm not a poverty case. I'm not claiming that in the slightest. But this is about Parle, not profit.
I mean, obviously, people who are going to want to see this book, where can they find it?
Yeah, I think it's pretty much available through all the usual outlets. It's sold out a couple of times on Amazon in the last few days, which is great. But it's on Waterstones and Blackwell's and Oliver's and Coles and all their kind of websites. And if you do go to a shop, then you with any luck, you'll be able to find it on the shelves. So if somebody says, like, for example, Waterstones sold out their first batch yesterday, and instead of having a 24-hour dispatch, it now says it'll be a week. So please just be a little bit patient, or have a little search around and find the particular link that will get it to you as soon as possible. And if you want to follow me on social media, I post links up there as to usually which is the most efficient one for getting it out. I am on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram, all as Peter Bleksley.
And of course, if people wanted to give you some advice or some creative advice, or actually wanted to help you find Parle, they can also reach out as well, can't they?
They certainly can, through any of those social media platforms, or my website, PeterBleksley.com. My email address is out there, peterbleksley@msn.com. Perfectly frank. And here in my hand, never to leave my side, is arguably the product of the best 10 quid I ever spent. It's my phone number specifically set up to receive information about Kevin Parle. Okay, and you know, please feel free to ring 07908 617 694. And what will invariably happen, excuse me, and what will invariably happen is that if you reach out and make contact on that phone, I will get back to you on my personal phone, the phone that I have been married to for almost as long as I've been married to my wife, you know, and never leaves my side and kind of rules my very existence, as it does for so many of us, I guess, these days.
Absolutely, I can't do without I got two phones, really. No burner phones though. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and I hope we can get to speak again when you've got Parle and you can ask him the questions that I know you really want to ask him, and maybe ready for the next book.
That would be a wonderful, wonderful occasion, and I sincerely hope that it will happen sooner rather than later. Thank you very much for having me on today. It's been an extremely long time since I was in a young lady's bedroom.
On that note, I will leave you to it. Thank you so much, Peter.